Young Guns is a classic, nostalgic 80s western that often doesn't get the recognition that it deserves. So let's take a look at 20 things you didn't know about the movie, such as the original cast that we never got to see, the Tom Cruise cameo that nobody noticed, and the behind-the-scenes accident that almost took out two of the Regulators. So the idea for Young Guns originally came from screenwriter John Fusco, who'd been fascinated by Billy the Kid ever since the age of 10. This was because when he first saw the famous image of the outlaw in question, he just couldn't understand how such an unconventional, unassuming figure had become such a legend of the Wild West. So, in the years that followed, Fusco began collecting information about Billy the Kid, believing that one day he might write a novel about him. But the moment that really inspired him to write Young Guns came when he first visited the gravesite of Billy the Kid in Fort Sumner, with Fusco explaining that he's buried there with some of his Regulators, and the epitaph on the tombstone is one word: pals. When I saw that, I knew I had my theme for Young Guns. And so, from just a single phrase, the concept for Young Guns was born, which Fusco actually references in the film when Billy says,
"Oh, Steve understands the meaning of the word pals, don't you, Steve? So you got 3-4 good pals, well then you got yourself a tribe."
So having just penned the underrated 1986 movie Crossroads, John Fusco decided to write a spec script for Young Guns, but had a lot of pushback from those around him. For example, Fusco said, "In the late 80s, my agents begged me not to pitch my Billy the Kid idea because the Western was dead," referring to the recent $36 million flop Heaven's Gate. But luckily, director Christopher Kane fell in love with Young Guns after reading just 16 pages of the first draft of the script, and agreed to help Fusco raise the $11 million budget required to get the movie made. So with Young Guns officially in the works, attention turned to casting, with the role of Billy the Kid being the top priority, given how important that character is in the movie. And so, Fusco formally offered the role to Sean Penn, who at this stage was probably best known for his role in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But due to his legal troubles at the time, Penn was unavailable for filming, prompting director Christopher Kane to suggest Emilio Estevez for the part instead, given that they'd already previously worked together on the movie That Was Then, This Is Now. And upon reading the script, Estevez immediately fell in love with it, apparently really excited by the prospect of being involved in an ensemble western. Now, despite the initial difficulties in getting Young Guns financed, as soon as the film cast Emilio Estevez, all of a sudden a stampede of famous young actors came forward in the hope of appearing in the movie. This was because, despite it being a western, the project was deemed by the industry to be a Brat Pack film, a popular brand of movie in the 80s made famous by films like The Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire, which would typically feature an ensemble cast of well-known young actors like Estevez, who frequently appear together in teen-orientated movies. So with Young Guns being viewed as another vehicle for this profitable trend, multiple famous young actors volunteered for a role as a Regulator, including Tom Cruise, Jason Patric, Judd Nelson, and Rob Lowe. But despite this sudden influx of interest, it didn't dissuade Fusco and Kane from casting who they actually thought would be the best fit for each part. For instance, the role of Dick Brewer was originally offered to Patrick Swayze, who ironically turned down the part in an effort to break away from the Brat Pack labeling. So instead, the role went to the brother of Emilio Estevez, Charlie Sheen, who were both the sons of the famous actor Martin Sheen. And for the role of Doc, they decided to go with Kiefer Sutherland, who was also the son of a famous actor in Donald Sutherland. But lesser known actors were cast as well, with Lou Diamond Phillips being sought out due to his breakout performance in La Bamba. Equally, Young Guns gave Dermot Mulroney what was essentially his first major film role, alongside Casey Siemaszko, who was also a relatively unknown actor at the time, having only really appeared in minor roles in Stand By Me and Back to the Future. Young Guns also provided actor Patrick Wayne with one of his more memorable roles as Pat Garrett, having previously appeared in westerns such as The Searchers and Big Jake, alongside his famous father John Wayne. So with the cast for Young Guns officially in place, a lot of the actors took it upon themselves to do research into the real historical figures that they would be playing. For instance, Emilio Estevez did a lot of research into Billy the Kid in an effort to try and understand who he really was. In doing so, he initially believed the famous outlaw to be an angry, abused soul who only really cared about himself. But over time, he came to realize that Billy the Kid was someone who actually thought a lot about other people, especially John Tunstall and his fellow regulators. Equally, Kiefer Sutherland was also encouraged to do research into the character of Doc, with John Fusco apparently offering him relevant history books to read. However, the actor turned them down, opting to approach the role with imagination and dramatic license so as to avoid the movie feeling like a docudrama. So while developing the story for Young Guns, writer John Fusco spent 5 months in New Mexico, researching the life and death of Billy the Kid, wanting his movie to be as accurate as possible. For instance, he managed to work in actual quotes from Billy the Kid into the script, and actually fought back against the studio to take the time needed to get the tintype of Emilio Estevez as close to the real picture as possible. But it would seem that this attention to detail paid off in the end, because despite there being at least 52 films and TV shows about Billy the Kid prior to the release of Young Guns, historian Paul Andrew Hutton deemed the movie to be the most historically accurate movie of its kind as of 1990. Now, despite Fusco doing his best to stay faithful to the true story of Billy the Kid, he was ultimately forced to deviate from history in some areas for the sake of the plot. For instance, in real life, the Regulators were actually made up of 11 members, but in the movie it was reduced to 6, to better explore the characters. Also, Young Guns continued the long-established trend of depicting John Tunstall as an older father figure type character, despite the fact that in real life he was murdered at the age of 24, and was actually younger than a lot of the Regulators. So once filming started on Young Guns, most of the movie was shot on location in Santa Fe County, New Mexico, so as to try and capture the spirit of the era. And this entailed filming a lot on the Bonanza Creek movie ranch, which was also used for a number of other famous westerns, including Silverado, 3:10 to Yuma, and pretty much every other western you can think of. So due to the action-packed nature of the movie, the cast did a lot of work to get in shape for the film, knowing that it was going to be a very physically demanding job. And as part of their training, the main cast were made to do 6 weeks of horse riding lessons, which eventually descended into chaotic games of horseback tag. But unfortunately, none of this seemed to help Charlie Sheen, who was reportedly a terrible horse rider, constantly falling off his saddle and even losing control of his horse when it got spooked during the Henry Hill shootout. Although he wasn't the only cast member to struggle on set, as Lou Diamond Phillips was deeply afraid of heights and always struggled with any scenes that involved them. So despite the size and scale of the production, it would seem that Young Guns didn't have the most organised set, especially when it came to its stunts and action. For instance, every fight scene shown on screen was completely improvised by the cast and stuntmen. And also, during the Henry Hill shootout scene, someone on set had the crazy idea of packing all of the ammo blanks in the prop guns with ceramic plaster, so that when they fired, they would make a louder bang. Now in fairness, the trick worked, but it also fired a clay-type substance at the cast and crew, apparently catching Dermot Mulroney in the shoulder blade and even hitting Emilio Estevez in the face, who actually had to stop filming for the day to get checked over. So Emilio Estevez easily had the hardest job in the movie of bringing the complex figure of Billy the Kid to life on the big screen. And initially, he really struggled with the role, as Estevez had always been taught to think as an actor and actively interpret what was in the script. However, the character of Billy the Kid was supposed to be very impulsive and raw, which simply wasn't coming across in his performance, due to the way in which he naturally approached acting. So, Christopher Kane forced Estevez to do multiple takes of each scene until his lines finally felt spontaneous and reactive. In fact, during the bath scene with Billy and Doc, Kane went as far as to deliver Estevez's lines on cue cards off camera, so as to force the actor to improvise, as if he really was dictating a letter off the top of his head.
I changed my mind. Kiss my ass.
So while filming Young Guns, the main cast had a lot of time to get to know each other, and ended up really hitting it off, given that they were all around the same age and from similar backgrounds. As such, the cast would spend a lot of time drinking and playing music, and when they got drunk, they would apparently make Lou Diamond Phillips perform a private rendition of La Bamba. Also, while filming, Estevez became known as a master prankster, initiating an all-out prank war on set that all started with him sending manure to his co-stars, under the guise that it was a gift from the studio. So all the brotherly camaraderie that you see on screen in Young Guns was totally authentic, and very much an extension of the real friendships that the cast shared in real life. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, it would be great if you could leave it a like, just to help share it to others. But anyway, let's get back to it. So while writing the script for Young Guns, John Fusco would often put on Wanted Dead or Alive by John Bon Jovi as mood music, to help him get into the head of Billy the Kid. So when Estevez was introduced to Bon Jovi through his Breakfast Club co-star Ali Sheedy, he cheekily asked if he could use Wanted Dead or Alive in Young Guns to play over the end credits. But the musician said no, believing that the lyrics didn't really match the film. However, he did agree to write a new song for Young Guns 2 called Blaze of Glory, which ended up being a massive hit. So perhaps one of the most famous scenes in Young Guns is when the Regulators take part in a peyote ritual, leading to some of the funniest moments in the movie.
Dog, did you see the size of that chicken?
Now obviously the cast didn't really take peyote in real life, but to make it look convincing on camera, they decided to fill the bowls with chicken soup instead. So during the filming of the scene in which the Regulators pass through a Native American village, Kiefer Sutherland was forced to leave the set to be present for the birth of his child. Now given that he had to rush away on such short notice, there wasn't really a backup plan in place for how they would shoot the scene in question without Sutherland. So in the end, the director had a stand-in pose as Doc, covering his face so that nobody would notice that it wasn't actually Kiefer Sutherland. Now despite Emilio Estevez being the face of the movie, the actor actually had an uncredited second role in the film outside of Billy the Kid. This was because when he wasn't needed on set during the filming of the final shootout scene, he would dress up as one of the gunmen trying to kill Billy, allowing him to play a role in both sides of the conflict without anyone even noticing. Another cameo in Young Guns that most people would never spot is that of Tom Cruise, because apparently the famous actor happened to be hanging around on set one day while filming something nearby, prompting director Christopher Kane to offer Cruise a role in the final shootout of the movie. And surprisingly, the actor agreed, taking on an uncredited role as a gunman in a brief cameo that most people wouldn't even know to look for. So one of the more offbeat scenes in Young Guns is when Charlie visits a brothel to ask an older prostitute to hold him as if she were his mother. Now in the script, it was originally meant to be a lot clearer that this was in fact a final goodbye between Charlie and his biological mother. In fact, there was supposed to be a scene clarifying as much, in which Dirty Steve makes a comment about the woman, prompting Charlie to snap back, revealing to the others that the prostitute was actually his mum. But this scene was cut, leaving an already weird scene just a little bit weirder for those who didn't read between the lines. So considering all the pushback John Fusco experienced from trying to make a western in the 1980s, he was probably a bit worried upon reading the early reviews for Young Guns, because many critics at the time really didn't like the movie, such as the TV Guide, who said, "Young Guns is simply not a very good movie, western or otherwise. Fusco's script provides little character development and muddles the narrative with some unlikely supporting characters." Now despite it falling flat with critics, in the end audiences loved the movie, and Young Guns went on to make $56 million on an $11 million budget, becoming one of the biggest hits of 1988. In fact, it was so successful that it spawned a sequel in Young Guns 2 and played a big part in revitalizing the Western genre for a whole new generation, with many still considering it to be one of the best Westerns ever made. Now despite how successful Young Guns was, one person that really didn't like the movie was Emilio Estevez himself. Because although he loved the script and westerns in general, upon watching the final film he was far from happy, later saying, It wasn't so much that the original Young Guns was such a terrible movie, but I sort of categorized the first one as the first heavy metal western. It bore no relation or no resemblance to the kind of westerns that I admired when I was growing up. I'm a big fan of Sergio Leone, especially Once Upon a Time in the West, so after seeing Young Guns I went, wow, this just didn't do it. It just doesn't have the scope. There wasn't a cohesive storyline, it was sort of a showcase for a group of young actors. But despite his disappointment with how the first movie turned out, Emilio Estevez was still keen to reprise his role as Billy the Kid in Young Guns 2, in which he felt he righted some of the wrongs of the first movie, creating a western that he felt a lot more proud of. And given the news that he's currently working on a third Young Guns movie, it's clear that Estevez does hold the franchise in high regard and believes that the story of Billy the Kid is not yet complete. But out of interest, let me know below what is your favourite Young Guns movie, and while you're here you might also want to check out this video right here.